information, I get to introduce you to one of my very important people in my network, and that is Fred Augustin. Fred and I have known each other now, gosh, through night and a lot of Century 21 SGR people, but you are beloved across the industry. And I think we did, Fred, didn't we do a Facebook Zoom like the first time we had done one, like a Facebook Live, right? Like
yeah, I believe that's right.
18 or 19,
Yeah.
like right before, who knew what a pandemic was, right? Right before we lived one. And we sat side by side because I didn't know how to stream it from two different locations. So, but let me do a little introduction of Fred to y'all that may not know him. So an attorney since 2003. And works with his beloved wife, Maura. But Fred has been an expert in zoning law and tax appeal since 2003, really working so many facets of it. He does commercial and residential zoning, but also commercial and residential tax appeal. Obviously, today we're going to be talking about residential tax appeal, the ins and outs, and I'm going to ask a few questions. If you have follow-up questions, I'll make sure to include his contact information in the commentary, so please look for that. But just in general, his best email address is first initial F, Augustin, Agustin, at AAPROP, P-R-O-P, tax.com, 773-315-3106. But let's get this kicked off here. So first and foremost, Fred, tell us a little bit about your law practice.
Sure. Again, thanks, Tammy, for hosting this, and thank you for having me. Just a little bit about my practice. Essentially, as Tammy alluded to, my wife and I started our own law firm, and actually we just started it last fall. So September 1st of 2022 was our official start date for our firm. And so, again, as Tammy alluded to, we focus on property tax appeal work as well as land use and zoning work, primarily in the city of Chicago. But in a nutshell, that's kind of our practice. It's a startup business, I guess you could say, but things are going well.
Yeah, well, the business is startup, but your knowledge and expertise certainly isn't, because you've been slaying this for 20 plus years. So good news for the rest of us. And just so everyone knows, I cheer on Fred because I personally use him as a tax appeal professional. So he is spot on, grade A, white glove service. Now, let's talk a little bit about, like reassessments and stuff. I think the first point of clarity is there's Cook County, and then there's collar counties, right? And I think you deal in all of them, but can you get a little more specific about what that means?
Sure. So, I think the main difference between the collar counties and Cook County is in Cook County, we're in a triennial system where properties get reassessed every 3 years. And in the collar counties, properties get reassessed every 4 years. So we're talking about right now about the, right now we're kind of in the 2023 tax year. And so right now in Cook County, all the properties in Southern Cook County are getting reassessed, and it's already kind of started. Later this year, all the properties in the collar counties, and when I say collar counties, DuPage, Lake, Kane, Will, all those properties are getting reassessed, and I suspect they probably won't start reassessing those properties till like the middle of summer. But that's primarily the difference between Cook and the collar counties.
Okay. But what I am hearing, right, because sometimes, again, it's not like we're ever given a ton of exposure to taxes, whether it's income or real estate taxes, state income taxes. But I just want to make sure that we understand this, and the approach is it's very much of a local, right? It's a municipality / kind of state, county tax discussion, right? It's not so much on a federal level.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. Just to clarify, yeah, it's very local. From a property tax standpoint, it's generated by the county itself, but the dollars that you pay actually go to the municipality. At least a portion of it goes to the municipality where the property is located. So, I think you'll probably pull up a tax bill and we'll show that. And the reason why that's important is, for instance, city of Chicago, you know, all properties in the city have their own tax rates. So the tax rates are by municipality. Wilmette has their own tax rate. Winnetka has their own tax rate. Evanston has their own tax rate. So, it's very local. The county generates the taxes. You appeal the assessments through the county, but the actual tax dollars, I guess, in a nutshell, kind of, a lot of it goes to the local municipalities. So it's very local, to your point.
Yeah, and you said something very interesting there. When we're appealing our taxes, we're appealing the property assessment, correct? It's taking me a long time to understand this, Fred. So we're appealing the assessment. Okay, can you expand on that a little bit? Because I think there's some confusion around, that piece of it.
Yeah, so just the way I always kind of explain it, first I go back to kind of how our tax is calculated. You take the property's assessment times the state equalizer times the local tax. So when you're appealing, as Tammy said, you're appealing the property's assessment. Mm-hmm. And in Cook County for residential properties, again, this is Cook County, but all residential properties are assessed at 10% of what the assessor thinks you're. So when you're appealing, essentially it's a fight over what the value of your property is.
I see. Because we have no influence on the other two pieces, because you said assessment multiplied by local tax rate multiplied by the state equalizer. So we have no influence on the multipliers, but that assessment, 10% of the market value is really what you're appealing.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And then, let's talk about that a little bit. How do we appeal our taxes? Because there's a couple different levels from what I've learned working over the years. Yeah,
and let's just focus kind of more on the residential type of property. So it's a class 2 in Cook County. So there are essentially 3 ways to appeal it. One way is to appeal it based on fair market value. And fair market value could either be, if it's a recent sale, meaning it was sold in the last 3 years, you could appeal based on recent sale. Now, I would only advise that you'd appeal based on recent sale, assuming your assessment is higher than what you purchased it. If you purchased it higher than what you're assessed at, then, you're not appealing based on recent sale. Yeah. So you can throw that out of the window. Along the same lines of fair market value, you could always get a tax appeal appraisal report. We do that sometimes for residential properties, especially the ones that are very unique. Unique meaning, for instance, we have a couple right now we're doing in River Forest where, you do have some high net worth homes over there. And some of these homes are just very unique in its regard where there aren't a lot of similar comps in terms of the data we have. So, you could always get a tax appeal appraisal for that. And we have appraisers that we utilize for that. So that's the fair market value approach. Another concept, which is predominantly the concept that a majority of people use for residential properties, is this concept called uniformity. And essentially we research comps that are similar to the subject property, basically with a lower assessment per square. So again, we do the research on that, but that's the predominant way in terms of the way you appeal residential properties. There's also another way to look at it is, and a lot of people don't talk about it, especially for residential properties, there's this concept of vacancy relief. If, let's just say the residential property was damaged by fire, so it's rendered uninhabitable, you could get what they call vacancy relief, which is significant relief on your tax bill for that given year, and it's only for 1 year. So those are the different ways you could appeal residential property.
That's interesting, the vacancy relief. I don't know if I ever knew that. That would be a good, for us real estate focused professionals, right? A good tactic for us to assist clients if there was something to happen.
Yeah, and especially, where that comes into play, especially around where I live, you see a lot of these older homes now getting rehab. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of these owners are not living in these homes right now while they're getting rehabbed or they're building additions. So you could get significant tax relief for that if you're rebuilding your home or rehabbing it, because it's rendered uninhabitable. So you could get significant relief for that. Now it's only for 1 year only. So if, let's just say, you're rehabbing a home this year in 2023, you could get tax relief just for your 2023 taxes. So it'll only be for 1 year.
Okay. Now let's talk about that piece, because I think that's interesting too, right? So we don't necessarily think about paying the way we pay property taxes here. Is it in advance or is it in arrears? And can you explain the difference?
So
With
it's
an
in
example.
arrears. Yeah. So for instance, let's take, for instance, we're in 2023 right now. Eventually we'll be paying, at least we already paid a portion of the 2022 property taxes. So as we all know, the first installment bills were released in April. Actually, they were released in March, I believe, and then they were due in April. So that was the first installment of the 2022 property taxes. Eventually, later on this year, maybe August, probably the fall, the 2022 second installment bill. So essentially what we're doing is we're paying property taxes in arrears. We're paying 2022 taxes this year in 2023.
And when you say first installment, that's January through June 2022 tax liability is paid. Let's say I think it was April 30th or so, right? In 2023. So second installment is July 1st through the end of the year, but that'll be due sometime. I guess typically it's like August, September, but we'll see this year because it's
typically, typically, I don't think that will happen. That's my opinion, but I just think right now they're really backed up because right now we're still technically also in the 2022 appeal session. A lot of those appeals have not, a lot of those appeals have not been resolved yet. So you can't generate the second installment bills until those appeals have been resolved.
So let's talk about 2022 appeals. So we're going to work backwards a little bit, right? So we can learn from our past to look forward to the future. So 2022 appeals have yet to all be resolved. When were those appeals submitted? When was the open window on those appeals?
So it depends on what township you're in. So, towards the spring, we're looking at the board review and, it was a bunch of townships. So for instance, all of Northern Cook County was reassessed. So you had Niles, Niles is still pending, Niles Township, Maine Township, Park Ridge predominantly, or Des Plaines, those appeals are still pending. And so to your point, until those appeals are completed, you can't release the second installment bills until those appeals are completed. And, they're still pending. A lot of these appeals are still pending. So, we're already in May. I suspect they probably won't be done until sometime in June. So if you just think about it, you probably won't get your second installment bill till maybe the earliest mid-August, September.
Okay.
Earliest.
So then do kind of October-ish, right? And the reason why I'm asking this is for those of us, right, we're all in real estate and, for closings, we have to recognize when the installments are going to be due, because right before we think they're going to be due, the title companies and the lenders add this TI, this tax indemnity, right? And it's typically 1.5, sometimes up to 2 times the expected bill. And that can throw off our bottom line numbers. That's why I bring this up. So realtors out there, I know you know what I'm talking about, but Fred is saying, well, we're kind of expecting maybe August, September, issue of a bill, right? That would mean that we're probably looking at TI set up for closings potentially June and July, or July and August, because we want to make sure the first payment is not due before, right, the tax bill is released. So that's why I wanted to kind of explain that a little bit. Okay. If you do have any questions, please put them into the chat. I will make sure I ask Fred, but I did put his contact information in the chat box for you. So I think we talked about, right, appealing, right, with the county assessors. Are there additional ways to appeal?
So, you know, there are two levels of appeal, the way I kind of look at it. The first level, at least in Cook County, it's with the assessor's office and the border. Or, I mean, you could do it either or you could do both, depending on where you are in the appeal process. If, let's just say, you're not happy with the, you know, the county levels assessment or decisions, you could always appeal further, which is kind of the second level, which is the Illinois Property Tax Appeal. And that's a state agency, and they hear tax appeals as well. So that's kind of your second step if you wanted to go that route. Now, just for practical purposes, you know, personally, especially for residential properties, I only file at PTAB if it's, let's just say, the decision's grossly, if the assessor's like really wrong, or if there's something really funky about it, if you know what I mean. You know, I guess my point in all that is I tend to avoid going to PTAB because right now PTAB's really back on their filing.
Oh, the Property Tax Appeal Board.
Yeah,
Took me a little bit to figure
really
out what
behind.
Okay.
Yeah, they're really behind. I mean, they're still reviewing tax years from the last triennial period.
Oh.
So,
okay.
I mean, the problem is with PTAB, yeah, it takes a while to get a decision. It could be years. So, you know, my rule of thumb is you really have to, they must have been really wrong in order for you to go there. You know, that's my barometer for PTAB, especially for residential properties, because, you know, you're going to be waiting for a long time. And, you know, if it's like 5 years from now, who knows, the owner may not even own the property. Yeah. So it's not, in my opinion, it's not worth it. But again, each case is different. So
absolutely. Every property is different, right? Every loan scenario is different. Every tax appeal situation is different. So it's going to the assessor, Cook County assessor first. We're talking about Cook County. Then it's going to the Board of Review. And then again, if something is gravely misstated, then we're looking at the Property Tax Appeal Board. So those are three levels. Okay. Now there's a triennial reassessment and then there's appeals. Are you only able to appeal triennially?
No. A lot of people get that confused. You know, that they're two different items. Obviously properties get reassessed every 3 years, but technically you could appeal every year.
Okay.
County. And that's true in the collar counties. So even if, let's just say, hypothetically, you get reassessed, you don't appeal that year, doesn't mean you're out. You could always appeal the next year. Or if you appealed your first year of your triennial period, and you could always appeal again the second year or the third year. So you could appeal every year. And that's the difference between the reassessment versus appealing.
Okay. And so what I'm hearing is that you should appeal every year, because why not ask for a lower amount? The answer may not change, but why not ask, right? Yeah,
and you know, you definitely, if it's your first year of your triennial period, I always say appeal. I mean, because you know that's probably the best time to appeal.
Oh, okay.
You know, your odds go down. Let's just say you get a reduction the first year, and then if you want to appeal again the second or third year, your odds of being successful, I mean, decrease. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Mm-hmm. But there are times where, you know, so the way I look at it is we could look at it again second or third year. I mean, we kind of make that decision for you, because, you know, you also don't want to waste your time too if you're not going to get it, you know. And you know, I tell that to people, you know, especially if they got reductions the first year, and I look at it, I'm like, well, you're probably not going to get anything the second or third year. So my opinion is you should just stand pat, you know. But I mean, again, you have the opportunity again to appeal the second or third year if you wanted to. You have every right to do that.
So real quick, before I show a tax bill and you can walk us through this tax bill, where can we find the schedule of what counties are able to submit appeals at?
Yeah.
I guess what parts of the city, right? Where's the triennial or the every 4-year assessment, and then when can you appeal? Where can we find that?
So assessor's website, I mean, they've done a good job in terms of laying out, at least for the assessor's office, what townships are open for appeal filing. And what townships, if it's a reassessment year for a lot of these properties, they'll publish that. So assessor's website for the assessor's schedule. The board review also posts their schedule. They won't start posting their schedule for 2023, probably not till August. But essentially, it's public information. So assessor's website and the board review's website.
Perfect. Okay, so those websites, I'll find the board of review one and send it out to everyone as a follow-up item. Okay, so let's look at, do you want to look at the Cook County property tax portal first or a bill?
Sure.
Which one do you want to
Let's look at a bill.
Let's look at a bill. All right,
Yeah.
So bear with me. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to bring the bill over. So you're going to see yourself initially, and then hopefully this works. Okay, so because our eyes probably need a little help here, right? You can see the bill, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is a 2021 second installment bill.
It is. Yes.
So, the one thing, if you always want to know where your tax dollars are going, this table right here is kind of the indicator where it's going. So as you can see in Cook County, you have a lot of taxing bodies.
Yeah.
I think we're probably the most. I think someone did a report out there that Illinois, especially Cook County, has the most taxing bodies in the nation. But at any rate.
If you want to, let's skip over that. We can't control that.
Right? Yeah, we can't control that. But as you know, this is where all your property taxes are going. And essentially, it's the budgets for these different taxing bodies that dictate your taxes. Really specifically, it dictates the tax rate. If you want to go back to the formula, which is right here. So, for instance, they published the 2020 assessment. Then the next row is the 2021.
Can I stop for a moment? So you're saying this is 10% of what the assessor assigns as value
for 2020.
For 2020, yes. I know I'm going back a little bit. Okay.
Yeah. So the next line is the 2021 property value in terms of what the assessor believes. And this is after the appeal. Let's just say this property appealed. This is what the value of this property is, $197,850 in 2021. So you take then 10% of that, which is the next line item, and then you come to your 2021 assessment. Again, the assessed value is when you're appealing, that's what you're fighting over. And then after you get your assessment, you have your 2021 state equalizer, which is 3.0027. Again, that's dictated by the state. We have no control over that.
Correct.
And then what you do is after you multiply that, you get your equalized assessed value. And then you get your local tax rate. And I believe this property is in Des Plaines. The 2021 local tax rate for Des Plaines was 10.237%. So once you do your calculation, you get the total tax bill for the entire 2021, which is $6,081 for this property. Now, the next column is exemptions, which I get a lot. Again, I always tell people exemptions are an after-tax benefit. It has nothing to do with the appeals. So as you can see here is a perfect example. So after the taxes have been calculated, your exemptions now kick into play. So obviously this owner was entitled to a homeowner's exemption, as well as a senior citizen exemption, as well as a senior freeze exemption. So you deduct those exemptions from the actual tax amount, and you come up with this 1,067. And then remember, you pay two installments every year. So first installment, you already paid 55% of the previous total years, which is this, and here it's 537.49. It doesn't look like this owner paid it. So what happens is then, it's still due, and then you have your second installment, which is 529.61, which comes out to again 1,067, 10
Yeah.
after the
So
exemptions.
just pausing here for a moment, just because I have real estate professionals on there. So from a lender perspective, a little bit of a sidestep, but I think important when we look at a tax bill, because you see this as the taxes and they look super appealing. Sometimes our clients think this is the taxes on this bill, but not necessarily specific to them, right? So if it's a non-senior, we would need to come back to this minus the homeowner's exemption, but we would add these numbers back in for qualifying purposes, right? So we'd have 6,081.6 minus the 1,023.7. Mental math there, what is that, like 5,000, say $58? Just for quick. So that's what we would use for our annual taxes. So we would have to add back in the senior items and then, make sure we qualify them properly. So I just want to take a moment of pause there to explain that, because this would not be the, foregoing tax rate for this home. As Fred's point, it gets reset with the transfer of ownership.
That's actually a good point. So, from my experience, the exemptions kind of go away when there is a change of ownership, and depending on the age of the buyer, they'll eventually qualify for homeowners, but they may not qualify for a senior or senior freeze.
Right.
People just have to be cognizant of that.
Yeah. So, nothing else here. I'll stop sharing this and come back to us on screen. But let's see. So great question. Can you appeal property taxes for an investment property?
Yes. Yeah. It's the same process as we discussed. There really is no difference. Again, the only difference would be the exemptions. But again, the exemptions they won't have an effect on your investment, because technically you shouldn't be getting exemptions on your investment.
So maybe yes. I'll ask the next follow-up question to that. Do we see property taxes for investment properties higher than property taxes for a primary owned residence?
Again, it depends on where the primary residence is located versus where the investment property.
So I think it's primarily due to there is no exemption, right? So all the exemptions are removed. So, Corinna, that's a great question. It's just that we don't see the exemptions there. So process is absolutely the same, but the difference is that there are no exemptions. So hence the reason why we see an escalated amount.
Yeah.
Great question though. Okay. So, do you need I get this question, right? People call and ask me like, oh, I need to appeal my taxes. And, they'll say, can I do it on my own? And I'll be like, sure. Do you know what to do? Oh, you're like, no, I don't know what to do. So hence why I refer them to you, right, Fred? But what is, the cost to hire a professional like yourself? And is there any risk?
There really isn't. So, I charge based on a contingency fee, basically a percentage of whatever I could save you. And a lot of my colleagues also charge the same. So it's the same no matter what. So if you look at it from a contingency fee standpoint, you have no risk in terms of appealing, because the worst case with appealing is, the assessor or board review just says, oh, you're assessed properly. So your assessment stays the same. So if your assessment stays the same going through the appeal process, then you don't owe me anything. Again, with the contingency, it's a percentage of whatever I could save you. And basically the way to look at it is I only get compensated, or my colleagues only get compensated if we're able to reduce your assessment. We're not
So
able
what
to
I'm
reduce your,
hearing is that you are truly paid on performance.
yeah,
Is
yeah,
what I'm hearing. Okay. And
yes.
so let's kind of crystallize this with an example. So if you save me $1,000 a year, and from my understanding, a typical contingency is 33%, right? The
Yeah,
fee, I should
yeah,
say. So, and your contingency fee is 33%. Essentially, I'm paying you $333 because, and 33 cents, because that's 33% of what you saved me, right? I'm not paying you 33% of my tax bill, but of the savings.
that's correct. And the way we do it, and all my colleagues do this, I mean, we estimate what the taxes would be if, let's just say, um, we did an appeal, or if your assessments stay the same versus what the estimated taxes would be based on the reduction. So essentially, then you take the difference, that's your tax savings, and we take a percentage of the tax.
Okay. And so do we do that when you go to the, county assessor's office and then board a review? Do you do it all in one swoop?
It depends on when you contact me. Generally, yeah, especially for a reassessment year, we try to do both.
Okay.
But sometimes if there's one place you do want to appeal, no matter what, is probably the board review.
I see.
And the reason why, the practicality why for the board review is, let's just say, we talked about PTAB earlier. The only way to get the PTAB, if you want to file an appeal at PTAB, is you need to file it at the board review.
There's an escalation process. Okay.
Yeah.
So there you have to go through that process in
Yeah.
order to get to PTAB.
Yeah. If you just appeal at the assessor's office and not the board review, you can't go to PTAB.
Okay. So if I were a property owner and, I really would like to go through the process personally myself first, maybe before using a professional, right? I think I can do this. I should go to the Cook County Assessor's website to see when the townships are open for appeal.
Yeah.
And on that website will be the process of how to appeal.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I would go to the Board of Review website to do the exact same thing.
And technically you probably won't be able to file the board review until the assessor's decision is rendered,
Yep.
So kind of a timing thing.
I just wanted to give, context for those that would like to know about it on their own. Now, the last question, let's see, Knight has a good question. Can the condo unit owner, 200 plus unit building, appeal his or her unit? Or do they need to do it with the association piece, the whole building?
That's actually a good question. Because, when I was with the board review, I was one of the guys reviewing condominium. So I know it pretty well. And I get that question a lot. So this is the way I advise people who come to me if they own a condominium unit. So first question is, can they appeal on their own? Yes, they can. However, the one thing I always tell them is, first find out if your association's appealing. If they are, or if they're planning on appealing as a group, I highly recommend that you join them. You don't have to join if you don't want to, but it's my recommendation that you join them.
It's like
And
a
if
power
they're
and
not,
numbers kind of theory.
excuse me?
Is it like a power and numbers type of theory? We're better together?
Yeah, kind of, a little bit. And I think when you're looking at condos, and even for townhomes, I mean, either if it's a single unit or group, they look at the whole building in terms of trying to come up with the valuation. So, I mean, you want to be consistent, I guess, with all your other neighbors who are appealing at the same time. So it's advantageous to be appealing as a group. However, if the association's not appealing as a group, yeah, by all means, you could appeal on your own. I appeal some individual owners, and I do represent a lot of associations as well. So it's always good for condos to appeal as a group, is my advice.
Okay. Now, I heard a lot of chitter chatter, right, with the release of last year's second installment and bills of like, oh my gosh, there was a huge increase. Can you give some clarity as to maybe some context to that? And at this point, are you seeing success on the appeals?
I'm seeing success. Obviously though, I think you're still going to see some type of increase in your taxes, especially from one triennial period to another triennial period. A lot of it is just in a sense, in your terms, like what you think is a reasonable increase. So, there were a lot of increases, especially up north, there were a lot of increases. You know, each property is different, but yeah, I mean, a lot of people saw some increases. And, I think though, if you looked at it, a lot of these property owners, they also bought their home pretty high in value. So it's hard to argue, well, I bought it for 1.2 million, but I don't want to be assessed 0.2 billion. So
yeah,
I mean, it's kind of a give or take, that's where you see the increase. But I mean, you should always expect an increase, especially from your one triennial period to a next triennial period. It's just a matter of, you want it to be reasonable. I hope that answers the question.
Oh, it does. I mean, it's a hard question to answer.
It is a hard question to answer.
Yeah, I know you're not answering. So the last question I have is sometimes I get this question, right? You'll see it on the tax bill as you went through the example, and I'm looking over at a different screen, so I see it on the tax portal. The estimated property value there is not necessarily what I bought my property at. So why is that? Why is there a disparity there?
Yeah. Well, I think the real disparity is basically, especially when you get reassessed, in theory, the assessor is supposed to take into account your sale. If let's just say you bought it within the last 3 years. Problem with that is there's so much property out there, especially in Cook County, to reassess. So it's hard for them to look at each property individually, saying, all right, this should be valued this, this should be valued that. So what they do is they take into account, they try to do a mass appraisal system where they try to come up with like an overall value of, for all similar single family homes or all similar buildings and what they sold for. And, they try to come up with a number. And then
like
if it's wrong,
increase, and then
if it's wrong, my advice to people, if you bought it for this, but you're reassessed this, which is higher than what you bought it for, then you should appeal. I mean, that's how you get that correct.
Yeah, grounds for appeal. So what I'm hearing is that upon transfer of property, right? So this property is going to transfer from one owner to the next. The county does that. They use that as the baseline for the new property assessment. But then in reassessment years, that's going to be more on an algorithm of overall kind of assumptions of property increase percentages in the area.
Yeah. And sometimes, you see this often where people buy it for higher, but they get reassessed lower than what they bought it for. I mean,
yeah, we don't argue against those.
No, you don't argue against that.
Yeah, we don't negotiate against ourselves for sure.
So, I mean, that happens a lot too. So,
yeah, well, we'll take it that way. It doesn't often come. But are there any other questions? You're more than welcome to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a direct question. Otherwise, I will say, let's, again, go in the chat, grab Fred's info and reach out to him. But thank you so much for those of you that joined. Thank you, Fred. You're always so giving on your information. You've been an incredible professional to both Bernie and I over the years. We so appreciate it. And I know you have a lot of real estate professionals here that also refer to you. So if you're looking for a great tax appeal attorney, call Fred. Maura's equally, she's more beautiful, no disrespect, Fred. But they are a great team. They are a great team. And even though the practice is new, congrats, you're coming up on a year. Their experience goes years and years. The roots run deep there, 20 plus years. So thank you again. Hope that everyone has an awesome afternoon, and I'll get this recording out and some other good follow-up information. Talk to everyone soon. Bye.
Take care, everyone.